Today we were discussing about the neurohumoral transmission. Neurohumoral transmission means a chemical mediated nerve transmission that was being dealt us by yesterday. So here there are varieties of the steps are there whenever the neurotransmission is there. So there are two types. One is axonal conduction and junctional transmission. So axonal conduction occurs as and when the action potential arises, there will be inward movement of the sodium and outward movement of the potassium. And when the action potential reaches to the peak, then there will be inward movement of the potassium, whereas the outward movement of the sodium takes place. That's called as the repolarization. So that's axonal conduction, whereas the junctional transmission has got varieties of the steps, starting from the release of the neurotransmitter. Then the second one is the combination of transmitter with post-junctional receptors and production of post-junctional activity. Here, very simple meaning of this is now the neurotransmitter has been released, and it is acting on the receptors on the post-junctional membrane, and the post-junctional potential is initiated. So the transmitter diffuses across the synaptic or junctional cleft. By this time, hope I may understand that everybody has understood what is a synaptic cleft or the junctional cleft, etc. So there are very specialized receptor on the post-synaptic post-junctional membrane, and this often results in a localized increase in the ionic permeability or conductance of the membrane. So through the presynaptic vesicles, they are going to dock with the membrane. Then there is exocytosis of the neurotransmitter. That's a chemical. That's known as the neurohumoral transmission. So what happens whenever the neurotransmitter is released? Then it will act on the post-junctional receptors and acts the activity. So there are three types of the permeability change occurs. One is a generalized increase in the permeability to cations, means the positively charged ions, especially sodium and calcium. So resulting in a localized depolarization of the membrane, that is called as the excitatory postsynaptic potential, and it is abbreviated as EPSP, excitatory postsynaptic potential, because of the inward movement of the sodium and calcium because of the cations movement. And second one is a selective increase in permeability to anions, especially the chloride ions, resulting in stabilization or actual hyperpolarization of the membrane, which results in inhibitory postsynaptic potential. So the inhibitory action is usually mediated by chloride ion channels, and it results in stabilization of the actual hyperpolarization of the membrane, which constitutes an inhibitory postsynaptic potential. So what happens, the another step is there is an increased permeability to potassium, because potassium then can exit the cell. Hyperpolarization and stabilization of the membrane potential occur. That is also known as the IPSP. So the stabilization, first there is hyperpolarization, then that membrane, that action is being stabilized by the further movement of the potassium. So initially there is increased permeability to sodium as well as and when the neurotransmitter is going to release and act on the postsynaptic membrane because of the sodium and calcium channel opening. Then the chloride ion channels opens, and this causes hyperpolarization. This is known as the inhibitory postsynaptic potential. Then this is maintained by the potassium channel. These are all the three steps. So the EPSP or IPSP means excitatory postsynaptic potential or inhibitory postsynaptic potential are due to the movement of the ions, nothing else than that of the ions, may be a positive charge or negatively charged ion. So these changes in channel permeability that cause the potential charges are specifically regulated by post-junctional receptors for neurotransmitter that initiates the response. So, how the further transmission of the impulse occurs is the neurotransmitter which is released into the synaptic cleft should act on the postsynaptic receptor and initiate the post-junctional activity. Under normal circumstances, these receptors may be localized on effector cell surface as seen in the neuromuscular junctions of the skeletal muscle, and other discrete synapses are distributed in a more uniform fashion, especially in case of smooth muscles. So, whenever the neurotransmitter is being released, then it is going to act on the post-junctional membrane. It may be a neuromuscular junction or the smooth muscle junction, then the postsynaptic activity or the action will be initiated. And the ligand gated channels, we have already discussed what's a ligand gated channel, because ligand gated channel is one to which if a ligand like the chemical or the neurotransmitter, if it binds, then the activity will start. So it's a large family of the proteins that include nicotinic glutamate receptors, which conduct primarily the sodium and cause depolarization and are excitatory, and gamma amino butyric acid and glycine receptor or gamma aminobutyric acid means GABA receptors or the glycine receptor. They are inhibitory in nature, whereas the nicotinic receptors and glutamate receptors are excitatory in nature because they are having the relation like ligand gated channel of the sodium, whereas the inhibitory channels do combine with the potassium chloride channels. And neurotransmitters also modulate the permeability of the channels of potassium and calcium indirectly, because whenever there is depolarization, there will be the calcium channels are being opened, then for the repolarization, potassium channels will be opened. And in this case, the receptor and channels are separate proteins and information is conveyed between them by the G protein coupled receptors. So, now we are familiar with the ligand gated channels and also the G protein coupled receptors. So, G protein means alpha, beta and gamma proteins will be there. Whenever a ligand comes and bind with that of the binding site, these will move. Then there will be a energy dependent adenosine triphosphate is connected to adenosine monophosphate. Then cascade of events will take place, and other receptors of neurotransmitters act by influencing the synthesis of intracellular second messengers and do not necessarily cause a change in the membrane potential. Yeah, and that is the second step. That means the initiation of the post-junction activity is the third step, whereas the first step is the release of the neurotransmitter. Then second one is the initiation of the what you call as the combination of the neurotransmitter with post-junctional receptor, and third one is the initiation of post-junctional activity. So an excitatory post-synaptic potential, if it exceeds a certain threshold value, it initiates a propagated action potential in postsynaptic neuron or a muscle action potential in skeletal or the cardiac muscles. So what happens whenever this excitatory postsynaptic potential initiates, the action potential is initiated, then it is going to be conducted on the skeletal muscles or smooth muscles and going to contract. In smooth muscle, the propagated impulses are minimal, and excitatory postsynaptic potential may increase the rate of spontaneous depolarization and enhance muscle tone. In gland, it initiates the secretion. So an IPSP which is found in neurons and smooth muscle but not in the skeletal muscle, which tend to oppose excitatory potentials initiated by the other neuronal sources at the same time and site. See, this inhibitory postsynaptic potential is most of the time it is restricted to the smooth muscles of the heart, intestine, etc. Whereas the excitatory postsynaptic potential. Of course, it is also a very common process in case of the skeletal muscles. Whether a propagated impulse or other response ensures depends upon this summation of the potentials. Here, suppose a neurotransmitter has released and it acts on different receptor. So there are excitatory actions and inhibitory actions. So what the final output action is the sum of these actions, whichever is dominating. That's about the domination of the action. And the fourth one is the destruction or dissipation of the neurotransmitter. So whenever the neurotransmitter is released, uh, so if it is there for continuously for long time, then there is chance like the fasciculation, continuous twitching or continuous inhibition, both are not required. That's why the neurotransmitter should be dissipated or destructed in the post-junctional membrane. So when impulses can be transmitted across junctions at frequencies up to several hundreds per second, it is obvious that there should be an efficient means of disposing the transmitter. So whenever large quantity of this neurotransmitter is being released, just like acetylcholine and norepinephrine, there should be a mechanism to remove all these unwanted debris, etc. So that's why the destruction or dissipation mechanism is present. And most cholinergic junctions involved in rapid neurotransmission, acetylcholine esterase is the enzyme which destructs the acetylcholine into acetic acid and choline, very in a flash-like moment. So, if the acetylcholine esterase, which is an enzyme which is responsible for the destruction of acetylcholine, it is inhibited, then a lot of acetylcholine is accumulated and it is diffused to the surrounding side for the destruction, final destruction. Under these circumstances, the effects of acetylcholine are potentiated and due to it is prolonged. If acetylcholine esterase is inhibited, then the action of the acetylcholine is potentiated or it is prolonged. Both may happen. Yeah, here you can very clearly see that whatever I have explained in the previous slides, it is diagrammatically here represented. So this is the presynaptic membrane. Then these are the synaptic vesicles. So synaptic vesicles do contain the neurotransmitter. And usually what happens whenever there is an action potential arises, so all these docking complexes like RAB3 proteins, sterimetocystine and many other docking complex like syntaxins, etc., they are going to act and there will be fusion of the molecules with that of the axonal terminal here. Then there is exocytosis of the neurotransmitter and the neurotransmitter acts on the post-junctional membrane. So whenever the neurotransmitter is released, it is going to act on the presynaptic receptors and there is chance that neurotransmitter reuptake is taking through the pump because it is energy mediated and it requires a pump or the carrier molecule, and once again it is this is known as the reuptake 1 and it is going to be stored inside the vesicle, that's also known as reuptake 2. So here then the released quanta of the neurotransmitters are going to act on the neurotransmitter receptors, maybe if it is adrenergic receptors, cholinergic means cholinergic receptors. So they are going to act on the receptor and initiate the post-junctional activity. So this may be another neuron or maybe a effector site, just like the smooth muscles or skeletal muscles. So what happens? Depending upon the type of the receptor present, there will be either inhibitory action or the excitatory action. So if this neurotransmitter released is acetylcholine, then if this is a neuromuscular junction, then there may be an M type of the receptors and the skeletal muscles are going to be contracted. So this is the axonal terminal. This is the axonal terminal, and this space, empty space between the post-junctional and pre-junctional membrane are known as the synaptic cleft. And this is a dendritic spine. This is a dendritic spine of another neuron. So, much more details are present in this particular diagram is concerned. See, here the action potential is also shown in this particular diagram is concerned. Whenever there is an action potential arises, the sodium ions move inside. Then the potassium ions go outside. Then there will be depolarization. Initially there is depolarization. Then there is initiation of the action potential, and the action potential is being propagated till it reaches the nerve endings. So these are the vesicles containing the excitatory neurotransmitters, or it may be inhibitory or also excitatory neurotransmitters. Depending upon the site, it may be acetylcholine, it may be norepinephrine, it may be GABA, it may be glycine, or many more type of the neurotransmitters. So then what happens? Because of the change in the electrical activity, the docking complex is activated here. Then these are going to fuse with the this presynaptic membrane, and exocytosis occurs. So exocytosis is evacuation of the vesicle in the synaptic cleft. So then the neurotransmitter, if it is excitatory also, maybe norepinephrine or epinephrine, acetylcholine, etc. So they are going to act on the postsynaptic membrane, and depending upon the type of the tissue, it may be inhibitory or it may be excitatory in nature. And some of the neurotransmitters, they themselves are inhibitory, just like the glycine receptors. And GABA and glycine receptors are inhibitory in nature, means they are going to inhibit the action of a particular neuron or nerve terminal. So here what happens, the receptors are present, maybe inhibitory the receptor, or the inhibitory receptors are present and excitatory receptors are present. Once again, whenever the neurotransmitter is going to act on the postsynaptic membrane, and if it is a excitatory neurotransmitter, then there will be inward movement of the sodium, and once again the potassium is going to out. So initially there is depolarization, then because of the outward movement of the potassium there is repolarization, and because of the chloride ions there is hyperpolarization, and the resting membrane potential is maintained at minus 70 millivolts. Whereas the hyperpolarization is due to the potassium channel is going to be out with the help of the potassium pump. Then this is also sometimes the energy mediated mechanism, and more negativity is maintained. That's called as the hyperpolarization. And ultimately the end action is inhibition here, whereas the end action is excitation in excitatory neurotransmitter release. It will be inhibitory if the neurotransmitter is inhibitory. So you can just assume two actions. One is the skeletal muscles are going to contract, or some receptors, presence of some receptors, especially beta 1 type of the receptor. This think that this is a smooth muscles of the heart, and here beta 1 type of the receptors are there. Then this is the norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is going to act on the beta type of the receptors, and it is going to relax, or it is going to contract the heart muscle because of the sodium in and potassium out. Whereas some of the receptors, especially the glutamate and glycine, they are going to cause the inhibition of the contraction, muscle contraction by activating the potassium channels. Hope you understood this concept. And once again, this is further explanation of the, here there are two type of the receptors are there. One is the cholinergic receptor and this is the adrenergic receptor. And here, of course, the parasympathetic neurons and acetylcholine, along with the acetylcholine, vasoactive intestinal polypeptide, and many other enzymes are also present. They are all known as the co-transmitters. And on the effector cells, there will be the receptors for acetylcholine. And in the synaptic cleft, this is the synaptic cleft, and that in the synaptic cleft always there will be the enzyme acetylcholine esterase, whereas the some of this acetylcholine is get diffused out, and the postsynaptic membrane may be a GABAergic membrane or cholinergic or any other what we call as the postsynaptic membrane or presynaptic membrane. This is the postsynaptic membrane. Here there will be, here three types of the action is dealt. One is the acetylcholine effector cell, and this is the norepinephrine, and this is the effector cell. So the neuron, sympathetic neuron, this is the sympathetic neuron, and it's the exocytosis of the norepinephrine takes place, and depending upon the effector site, either inhibitory action or excitatory action is going to be taken place. And this is the co-transmitter, that's the neuropeptide Y, and many times it is get diffused out. And in case of the central nervous system, yes, in the next course we are the central nervous system, the GABAergic neurons also have the similar type of the structure activity. Just this is a synaptic neuron, and GABA, it's a inhibitory type of the neurotransmitter in the central nervous system. It is going to act released, and it is going to act on the postsynaptic membrane. Usually the destruction occurs by diffusion out, whereas here a specific enzyme is present in the cholinergic system, that's acetylcholine esterase. Of course, in case of adrenergic nervous system, it's a little bit lengthy process of the destruction of the neurotransmitter. Most of the time it is uptaken back, whereas this is what you call as dissipated due to the glial cells, especially the GABA, glycine, etc. They are going to dissipate. The purpose of showing this particular diagram is the different type of the processes, especially cholinergic, adrenergic, and central neurotransmitter. They are different in nature.